Hello everyone. If you like this audiobook and want to listen to more, please consider subscribing. And if you like this video, like it as well, that it enjoy.
Goodbye. End of an arc. The day for Saturo to finally leave had arrived. Cynthia was trying her absolute best not to cry out loud. So instead, she crossed her arms and coolly said, "Cynthia, don't embarrass yourself without me around." Meanwhile, inside her thoughts. Cynthia's thoughts. Did I look cool? Of course I did. Wait. Stop thinking. Stop thinking. There's literally someone here who can hear my thoughts. Wait. Can't I use that as a weapon against him? I'm a genius, aren't I? Saturo simply stared at her before grinning ear to ear like a demon who had just discovered human suffering. Then, directly inside her mind through telepathy. Saturo's voice. Don't worry. You still have the potential to become my servant after the bet. I already have an entire list prepared for you. Cynthia instantly froze. Cynthia's thoughts. You bah. Saturo continued mercilessly. Saturo's voice. I'll even prepare a custom outfit for you. Then we'll go to amusement parks, restaurants, and theme parks. You'll become my prey. To clarify before someone says something stupid, the outfit part is them insulting and teasing each other, not flirting. They are literally 9. Escanor let out a tired sigh. Escanor. They're at it again. Only a minute ago, Oriana and Escanor had been sobbing while hugging each other dramatically, saying they didn't want to part ways. But the moment Saturo and Cynthia started arguing again, both Pokémon immediately lost the emotional mood. Oriana. Yeah, never mind. They'll survive. Nurse Joy had also personally come to see Saturo off. Mostly because half of her workload was finally leaving town. Unfortunately for her, the other 49% was still staying behind for another year. Nurse Joy. Finally, peace. Cynthia. Oi, Nurse Joy. Muttering in her breath about, half peace. Or something about, 1 more year. Before leaving, Saturo also went to speak with Officer Jenny about his internship plans and received her approval and signatures. After that, he spent some time talking with Cynthia's grandmother about the future. Even though the old woman clearly didn't want the white-haired troublemaker leaving town so early. In the end, she still respected his decision. He finally got his Pokeballs and then gently poked Ace, Rem and Escanor on their heads, after explaining the whole situation. LL. 3 comments 0 vote. Brief visit to grandparents. Shish, don't worry because I am here. Struck an exaggerated heroic pose similar to All Might. Unfortunately, the effect was ruined immediately. Well, Saturo muttered while staring at his own creator, great pose for someone with a stickman body, I guess. Get lost, you white-haired free. Ahem, never mind. Continuing onward, Saturo pulled out 4 Pokeballs. Inside them were Escanor, Ace, Rem, and James's mysterious final Pokémon. Carnivine. Yes, Saturo had actually taken a detour after suddenly remembering something James mentioned before leaving. Apparently, James once said he had left one of his Pokémon behind inside a Pokeball. I still wonder how a psychic forgot that. Shut up, Saturo immediately replied. I wasn't in the mental state to deal with that at the time. I was too focused on his departure. To put it simply, you weren't listening properly because James talks too much and keeps bragging about his achievements. That is also true. Still, Saturo had not released the Pokémon yet. Mostly because James never actually told him which Pokémon was inside the Pokeball. The idiot apparently wanted to keep it a surprise so he could dramatically reveal his ultimate trump card later. After several hours of traveling, Saturo finally arrived in the Hoenn region. From there, he spent an entire day making his way toward the resort and daycare center managed by his grandparents, a retirement business that somehow also doubled as a Pokémon paradise. Unfortunately, Saturo soon discovered a terrible truth. He was lost, horribly lost. After checking the regional map several times, Saturo finally realized his grandparents' home was literally on the opposite side of Hoenn. What should have taken 1 hour would now take almost 2 full days. Silence filled the area. Escanor looked at him with complete disappointment. Just accept it, he said calmly. Without Mama, you can't even find your way home. Ace and Rem immediately tried holding back their laughter. They failed. Saturo slowly adjusted his glasses. The atmosphere became dangerous. Then, he teleported away without another word. The next second, Saturo appeared several kilometers away on top of a random cliff. The wind blew dramatically through his hair while his jacket fluttered behind him like he was some mysterious anime mentor. Piccolo aura farming moment. He changed his clothes for the aura. Unfortunately, he lost all his aura the next second. He had teleported in the wrong direction again. Escanor stared at him silently. Ace immediately looked away to avoid laughing. Rem had already accepted that her trainer was mentally challenged when it came to navigation. Saturo slowly looked around at the unfamiliar scenery. Then back at the map. Then at the scenery again. This region is too big. Escanor sighed deeply. At this point, I genuinely think Mama raised you. Shut up. Saturo finally stopped relying on instinct and used his psychic abilities properly for once, scanning the surrounding area for human settlements. A few moments later, he sensed a nearby town. Without hesitation, he teleported again. This time successfully. Well, mostly successfully. Because the moment he arrived, he found himself standing directly in the middle of a crowded marketplace. People screamed. Several trainers jumped backward instinctively. One old man dropped his groceries. A Wingull stole the old man's sandwich immediately afterward. OFC he found himself standing on the head of a Snorlax who was fighting in trainer. Saturo blinked once behind his glasses. Oops. A psychic, someone whispered. No, that's definitely a ghost-type trainer. Why is there a child appearing out of thin air? Saturo ignored the growing panic and simply first knocked out the Snorlax with a hypnosis and proxetted to calmly walked forward as if materializing in public was completely normal behavior. Behind him, Escanor followed proudly while Ace and Rem tried pretending they did not know him. Then, chomp, silence. Saturo slowly looked downward. The unopened Pokeball hanging from his waist had suddenly opened by itself. Attached to his head was a giant Carnivine. Quote, quote. The marketplace collectively froze. Carnivine happily chewed on Saturo's head while making affectionate noises. Saturo's voice came out muffled. I understand now. Escanor tilted his head. Understand what? Why James abandoned this thing? Carnivine tightened its bite affectionately. It's eating my brain. Bold of you to assume there was much to eat. Saturo, fight me. Unfortunately, Carnivine seemed to immediately recognize Saturo as James's brother because a certain someone would keep showing him photos and brag till he had to go in the Pokeball himself. It refused to let go no matter what happened. Even when Saturo used Psychic to pry it off, it simply wrapped around him again like a starving koala. Several nearby trainers stared at the scene with complicated expressions. One little kid pointed excitedly. Mom, I want a Carnivine too. The mother immediately covered her child's eyes. No, sweetie. We're not raising parasites. Carnivine hissed at her proudly. Saturo sighed in defeat before finally deciding to continue the journey while carrying the plant monster attached to his head. Thus, a strange group could now be seen traveling across Hoenn. A dead-eyed psychic child, a disappointed lion, 2 Pokémon trying not to laugh, and 1 Carnivine aggressively claiming ownership over Saturo's skull. 1 comments 0 vote, brief visit to grandparents 2. Finally, how the hell do you have navigation skills this bad? Saturo. What? Asked in an irritated tone. You can give Zoro a run for his money though there aren't any devices in his world, so you are even worse. By the time Saturo finally reached his grandparents' resort, the sun had already begun setting. The large daycare resort sat near the coastline of Hoenn, surrounded by forests and warm ocean winds. Various Pokémon wandered around peacefully while tourists relaxed nearby. The moment Saturo stepped through the entrance gate, several Pokémon immediately noticed him. A Growlithe barked happily, a Tropius lowered its head curiously. And then, an elderly Slacking opened one eye before immediately going back to sleep after deciding Saturo was not important enough to move for. Alexam sat there like he knew there was going to be trouble inside after seeing Rem who had evolved into her middle stage. Quote, Rude, Saturo muttered. Carnivine continued chewing on his head proudly. A few nearby workers stared at the scene in horror. Then the front door of the main building suddenly burst open. Saturo. An old woman rushed out at terrifying speed before pulling Saturo into a crushing hug. Grandma, please personal space. His grandmother ignored him. Completely. You got taller. Why are you thinner? Are you eating properly? Why is there a plant patting your head? Long story. A tall old man slowly walked out behind her while holding a cup of tea. Unlike Grandma's explosive energy, Pops looked calm and composed. He took one glance at Carnivine. James. Saturo blinked. How did you know? Only that idiot could raise something with attachment issues this severe. Carnivine nodded proudly. Escanor walked forward respectfully while Ace and Rem stayed behind him. Pop's eyes softened slightly. You raised them well. Saturo scratched his cheek awkwardly. Yes, it took a lot of effort. Everyone of his Pokémon scoffed except Escanor and Ace. Ace. Well, I raised you, so it's the other way around. That explains the lack of discipline, Grandpa replied immediately. Saturo. Quote closing parenthesis. Grandma laughed loudly before dragging Saturo inside by the arm. The house itself felt warm. Old photographs covered the walls while various Pokémon slept lazily around the living room. Saturo immediately recognized several pictures of his grandparents during their younger days alongside unfamiliar regions and old companions. Grandpa quietly sat across from him. So, Saturo already knew what was coming. You're leaving soon for your internship. Yeah. For Kanto and Johto. Saturo nodded silently. The room became quieter after that. Grandma eventually smiled softly while placing food onto the table. Then make sure you enjoy it properly. Saturo looked up slightly. Pop spoke with wisdom. Traveling isn't only about becoming stronger, she continued. It's about meeting people you'll remember later. Grandpa took a sip of tea. And try not to accidentally destroy a region. Said teasingly. That happened once. Once too many. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Grandpa suddenly glanced toward him again. You miss your new friends? Saturo paused. Cynthia. The constant arguing. The noise. The chaos. Maybe a little. Grandpa smirked knowingly while Grandma looked like she had already figured everything out weeks ago. Saturo immediately felt danger. Don't start. Granny, so where did our young lad stay in his 2 years in Sinnoh? Saturo felt true fear, the fear he only felt when he was with a blonde-haired girl who played both delinquent and nerd. 3 comments 0 vote. Brief visit to grandparents. As Granny questioned where exactly Saturo had vanished off to, her sharp eyes suddenly landed on the thin locket hanging around his neck. It was shaped like a 4-leaf clover. And from the way it slightly bulged, it clearly held photographs inside. Saturo instantly felt danger. Saturo internally, hey AN, why don't we skip this scene? Let's off-screen this nonsense. AN, shouldn't have mocked me earlier. Saturo, why are you being so petty? AN, they call it character development. Saturo, you sure you aren't Gurgur's evil twin? AN, if I was, you'd already be a Kit Kat. Saturo blinked. What does that even mean? AN, you didn't exist during the Great Lobotomy era. Truly the golden age of lobotomy. Saturo looked horrified. Did humanity participate in some kind of roleplay or something? AN, never mind. Meanwhile, Granny continued staring suspiciously at the zoning out child holding the locket. Her expression slowly darkened. Oi brat, Saturo immediately looked up. How long have you been gone for you to start stealing things? Saturo nearly choked. Jesus, how does one even come to that conclusion? Granny crossed her arms. Well, it's not like you spent even a little money from our gift. The only purchase on that card is the plane ticket between regions. She narrowed her eyes suspiciously. And right now, you look guiltier than a Meowth in a fish market. Saturo. From another room, Pop's voice suddenly echoed out. What the? Where did my tea leaves go? Wait, why is there a hole in my flower pot? Everyone slowly turned toward the hallway. Carnivine could be seen buried halfway inside the flower pot after apparently ripping the flowers out and planting itself proudly in their place while waiting for praise. Pop stared silently at the scene. James. Even he didn't have the energy to say anything else anymore. Meanwhile, Saturo had already started slowly sneaking away. Unfortunately, no you don't. Granny grabbed him instantly. You still haven't answered my questions yet. Then her tone softened slightly. It's alright if you don't want to tell this old hag everything, she said gently. But at least give us a summary. I need to know whether you're ready for the real world or not. Saturo went quiet. Granny continued calmly. Yes, you're strong, but psychic powers alone don't solve everything. Her eyes softened. And no, sneaking away won't work either because I'm not letting my grandson suffer alone out there. For once, Saturo didn't joke back immediately. The worst part, Granny muttered, was searching half of Johto and Kanto trying to find you only to discover you somehow ended up in an entirely different region. Saturo blinked. Seriously? Yeah. And while searching for you, your idiot Pops almost got scammed again by that Magikarp salesman. Yes. The legendary golden Magikarp bloodline continues. Saturo immediately burst out laughing. He actually fell for it. From the other room, Pops yelled back defensively. It was shiny. It was spray-painted. Granny rubbed her forehead tiredly before suddenly noticing something else. And what about that matang you brought along? Was that also from the mysterious person who gave you this locket? Saturo blinked before answering honestly. No, that one hatched from the egg you gave me. Granny froze slightly. For a moment, genuine surprise crossed her face. That egg had originally been considered a dud. She only gave it to Saturo hoping he'd learn responsibility from taking care of Pokémon eggs. If it broke accidentally, she had planned to pretend cold him before revealing the truth. Instead, the thing actually hatched. She quickly coughed into her hand before regaining composure. Then, she snatched the locket directly off Saturo's neck. Ow! Granny ignored him completely while examining it carefully. The craftsmanship was excellent. Elegant. Detailed. And most importantly, it was only half of a complete design. The clover-shaped locket was magnetic. Two halves could combine together into a larger clover capable of storing multiple photographs. Even separately, both pieces still looked beautiful. Definitely not some cheap keepsake. Granny slowly raised an eyebrow. So, she stared directly at Saturo. Would you like to tell me how to open this locket? Saturo immediately attempted to teleport it back into his hand. Nothing happened, because Granny was fully prepared. Black glasses, ghost-type accessories, even psychic-resistant charms. Not because she feared him, but because she never wanted Saturo accidentally hurting himself if his powers lost control. Granny smirked slightly. Then she glanced at Saturo. So it really is a pair. Saturo immediately looked away. Which unfortunately counted as a confession. Critical hit. Saturo, can you stop narrating my downfall like a sports commentator? Absolutely not. Granny's eyes narrowed mischievously. So, she slowly raised the locket higher. Who has the other half? Saturo crossed his arms immediately. No comment. Girlfriend? No, absolutely not, while his face turned a shade of pink from embarrassment. Boyfriend? Somehow that's even worse. 3 comments, 0 vote. Fighting for dignity. For a moment, the atmosphere returned to its usual chaotic rhythm. Then Granny's attention shifted toward the bag Saturo had brought with him. Her brows furrowed slightly. Something about it felt strange. Too light, too organized, too prepared, a dangerous combination when attached to any member of this family. Internally, she sighed. How exactly had every single one of them inherited that old fool's reckless nature? Even Saturo somehow managed to disappear across regions, develop psychic powers, gather suspiciously powerful Pokémon, and return home acting like this was a completely normal life decision. Pops proudly pointed at himself. I was born talented. Granny deadpanned. Ya got stuck in a tree for 6 hours because ya wanted free berries. Pops coughed. Strategy requires sacrifice. Truly the bloodline of all time. Ignoring the nonsense around her, Granny carefully opened the bag. Inside were 2 photo albums. Her expression paused. Those albums, she recognized them instantly, because she owned the exact same copies. A small warmth flickered through her chest before her attention slowly returned toward the pendant hanging around Saturo's neck. The 4-leaf clover design gleamed softly under the room's lights. Sue, Granny dragged out suspiciously, this person isn't your girlfriend or boyfriend. Saturo instantly stiffened. Correct. Then who exactly are they? Saturo's eyes shifted away. Granny smiled. That terrifying grandmother smile capable of destroying entire bloodlines emotionally. Let me see. Click. Wait. Saturo immediately jumped forward dramatically. Unfortunately for him, Granny casually sidestepped. Saturo missed entirely and nearly crashed facefirst into the couch. Incredible display of athletic failure. Saturo. I slipped. Against air. While Saturo continued arguing with a voice only he could hear, Granny quietly noted something important. Yes, her grandson possessed enhanced physical abilities thanks to his psychic powers. But there was a massive difference between being physically gifted and actually knowing how to fight. For someone constantly attracting danger, his combat instincts were embarrassingly underdeveloped. She would need to fix that later. Much later, she opened the first panel of the locket. Inside was an older photograph. Young Saturo sat between Granny and Pops while aggressively pouting at the camera. Meanwhile, Pops proudly held up an oversized Magikarp with the confidence of a world champion. Granny's expression softened instantly. "Ya still kept this one." Saturo looked away awkwardly. "Obviously." Pops sniffed dramatically. "My boy still loves us." "Saturo. Calm down, old man." The second panel clicked open. This time it showed James tightly hugging a much younger Saturo while Carnivine wrapped around both of them like an overgrown vine monster. Young Saturo looked seconds away from suffocation. Pops burst into laughter. "Ha ha ha ha, look at your face. Saturo. I was fighting for my life. And losing." Then Granny opened the third panel. Silence filled the room. Her jaw slowly dropped. Two pseudo-legendaries raced across endless dunes while sand exploded behind them like waves. Oriana, Escanor, both moved with terrifying freedom as Matang floated proudly nearby, its metallic body shining brilliantly beneath the sunlight. Granny's eyes snapped toward the real Matang floating quietly nearby. Then back toward the photo. Then toward Matang again. "Wait." Matang awkwardly froze midair. "Don't tell me." Her voice became quieter. "That thing is shiny." Matang proudly crossed its arms. Saturo scratched his cheek nervously. Surprise. The room froze again. Because amidst all the emotional chaos of finally reuniting with their grandson, they had somehow completely ignored the fact that he casually walked into their home with a shiny pseudo-legendary beside him. Casual side quest behavior. Saturo. When you say it like that it sounds insane. Because it is insane. Granny slowly narrowed her eyes toward Escanor in the picture. Then toward the empty matching half of the pendant. Then finally back toward Saturo. So the other person must own that pseudo-legendary. Saturo immediately looked away, which was answer enough. 2 comments 0 vote. Fighting for dignity. Granny's fingers slowly moved toward the fourth leaf of the clover pendant. The atmosphere inside the room instantly changed. Even Pops unconsciously leaned forward. Carnivine stopped chewing the curtains. Escanor quietly floated in place. And Saturo looked like a criminal witnessing his execution date being announced in real time. He spoke slowly, eyes locked onto the pendant. "Don't you dare." Immediately replied. Dramatic reveal arc. Saturo. Delete the chapter. Ignoring him completely, Granny narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "Now I definitely wanna see it." The old woman slowly began opening the fourth leaf of the clover. Painfully slowly, like someone unboxing a legendary treasure chest. Or exposing blackmail material. The hinge creaked softly. A tiny glimpse of the hidden photograph became visible. Then, "Nah, old hag." Saturo moved instantly. Psychic energy burst around him as he lunged across the room with terrifying speed, practically diving through the air before snatching the pendant right out of Granny's hands. Unfortunately, not before she saw it. Just for a second. Long blonde hair illuminated softly beneath sunlight. Sharp confident eyes, and black clothing she recognized almost instantly. It was a girl. The image disappeared the moment Saturo clutched the pendant protectively against his chest, trying to preserve the last fragments of his dignity. But the damage had already been done, even if she hadn't seen the full face. Granny's eyes widened. "Wait." Silence filled the room. Then, "Oi brat." Her voice exploded through the house loudly enough to make Carnivine jump. "Y'ave been out for only 2 years and ya somehow became so unruly." She reacted like someone whose favorite drama had been shut off mid-episode. Pops waved his hand lazily from the side. "Relax. He probably doesn't even know why girls and boys are different yet." Saturo nearly choked to death. That is not the important part here. The moment he turned to bolt out of the room. Too late. Granny grabbed his wrist with terrifying precision. "Ow ow ow." Saturo winced while trying to pull away. Then froze. Because something was wrong. Very wrong. Granny's hand passed through his, not metaphorically. Literally. Her fingers became translucent for a split second before slipping through his grip entirely and reappearing around the pendant itself. The locket was instantly yanked back into her hand. The room went dead silent. Saturo blinked once, twice. Then aggressively rubbed his eyes. "What?" He stared at Granny in complete disbelief. "Am I hallucinating or are you a ghost, old hag?" Then after a pause, "Or did you die while I was gone and now you're haunting me?" Granny. Then, a slow dangerous grin spread across her face. "Who exactly do ya think ya inherited those abilities from, brat?" Saturo's brain visibly stopped functioning. Pops immediately looked away and pretended to inspect the destroyed flower pot like this entire situation had absolutely nothing to do with him. Instantly appeared. Lore drop. Saturo, you never told me this. Granny smugly adjusted her black-tinted glasses. HMPH. A faint ghostly shimmer flickered around her fingers before fading away. You can learn that too someday. She crossed her arms proudly. If ya become a proper ghost-type trainer like me. Then she added with absolute confidence. In fact, I'll personally teach ya. Pops immediately sat up in horror. No, the deal was that our second grandson follows my grass and general type path. Granny merely smiled wickedly. Ya can have James when he comes back. Pops instantly shut his mouth. At his age, sleeping on the couch was a terrifying threat. Saturo looked genuinely betrayed. This was important information. Skill issue honestly. While Saturo mentally collapsed in the background, Granny casually reclaimed the pendant again. Then, click, the fourth leaf opened completely. Silence. Pops slowly leaned over her shoulder curiously. Granny's teasing expression disappeared instantly. Not anger. Not shock. Just pure amusement and delight. Inside the final panel was a clearer photograph. Cynthia lay beside Saturo underneath the shade of a tree somewhere far away in Sinnoh. Both of them looked exhausted. Yet despite of that, Cynthia was sleeping while Saturo was just tired and near sleep while two Pokémon were laughing at their stupidity, which only happens when two children have done something mischievous and ran away knowing the other would keep their mouth shut, between two children who trusted each other completely. And resting quietly between them was the matching half of the clover pendant. The room became strangely quiet. Even Carnivine stopped moving. Granny slowly looked up from the photograph toward Saturo. Then back toward the picture. Then toward Saturo again. Brat. Saturo immediately looked away. She looks exactly like that old hag Clara. Saturo blinked. Who? Pops nearly dropped the broken flower pot. Oh, Clara. He snapped his fingers loudly. That scary blonde girl from our traveling days. Granny snorted. Girl, that old hag nearly fed ya to a Gyarados after ya stole her lunch. Pops defended himself immediately. I thought it was my lunch. Saturo slowly looked between both grandparents. Wait. His eyes widened slightly. You know Cynthia's grandmother. Granny crossed her arms smugly. Of course we do. She used to travel with us back in the day before we all settled down. Pops scratched his chin thoughtfully. Still can't believe her granddaughter looks almost exactly like her. Then both grandparents slowly turned toward Saturo. Silence. Saturo immediately sensed danger. Don't. Granny's eyes narrowed. Brat, that's a matching locket. Saturo immediately pointed defensively at the pendant. It was practical at the time. 6 comments 0 vote. Teasing grandparents. The curtain finally stopped falling. Which honestly felt impressive considering half the house looked one strong breeze away from structural collapse. Carnivine remained proudly wrapped around Pop's head like a carnivorous turban. Viney. Give me food. Pops, get it off. No, Saturo said immediately. Pops looked betrayed. Granny ignored the ongoing hostage situation completely while turning the clover pendant around thoughtfully in her hands. Click, click. The 4 leaves opened and closed softly beneath her fingers. Saturo noticed instantly. Old hag, give it back. No, that's emotional blackmail. That's called being ya grandmother. Unbeatable boss enemy. Saturo, you aren't the author, who are you? Who else, brat? I am the author. Saturo, there is something fishy here. Why didn't you talk to me at the start as usual? Not only that, why are we even talking? And I think you are forgetting something, aren't you? I was bored. Saturo, oh, isn't there any better excuse you can come with? Saturo collapsed backward onto the couch dramatically. I miss Sinnoh. Pop's muffled voice emerged from beneath Carnivine. Probably because the blonde girl was there. Saturo pointed instantly. I hope the Carnivine eats you. Carnivine looked genuinely tempted. Meanwhile Escanor quietly floated toward the pendant curiously. The tiny ghost flame tilted his head while staring at the picture inside the clover. Then his little candle flame flickered brightly. Esca. Granny raised a brow. Escanor flashed a smile toward Saturo. I got you, Dad. Meta. Saturo in his mind. Maybe raising you wasn't a waste after all. After this maybe I will hold back on your training a bit. I shouldn't be so strict after all. Escanor slowly pointed one tiny arm toward the photograph, then toward Saturo, then dramatically made a heart shape with the help of telekinesis and leaves. Silence. Absolute silence. Saturo stared at him in betrayal. You too, even the robot has figured it out. Saturo started shouting like Kira after he was caught. it is a friendship locket. Pops finally managed to pull Carnivine slightly off his face. Those exist. Saturo. Yes, Granny. No they don't. Saturo. They absolutely do. Granny snorted loudly. And continued with her teasing. Brat, maybe we didn't tell you, maybe because you were too young at that time. But in traditional sense, you were practically carrying half a marriage proposal around your neck. Saturo looked like his soul briefly left his body. I'm surrounded by psychopaths. Carnivine suddenly patted his shoulder sympathetically with one vine. Saturo looked at it flatly. You are literally chewing our curtains. Vine. Want some too? NVM. Granny chuckled quietly before looking back at the pendant again. For a moment, the teasing faded. Her thumb brushed lightly over the tiny photograph. Clara used to make that exact same expression. Pops suddenly froze mid-thought. Wait. The old man slowly turned toward Granny. Does this mean Clara's granddaughter is gonna start showing up here eventually? Silence. Saturo's eyes widened instantly. Don't foreshadow that. Too slow. Granny leaned back smugly. If she's anything like Clara, she'll absolutely appear uninvited. Pops nodded gravely, and probably threaten someone within 5 minutes. Saturo immediately defended Cynthia on instinct because they were partner in crimes, increasing the irritation of the entire town for 2 years. She does not do that. The room became quiet again. Very quiet. Because he answered way too fast. Automatic defense response detected. Saturo slowly realized that he had being tricked. I walked into that one too. Granny's grin widened dangerously. Oh ho, protecting her reputation already, and going against your own grandparents for her. Ho ha ho. Saturo. No, though his face was turning redder than a tomato. Pops pointed dramatically. He didn't even hesitate. Saturo, because you're slandering her. Carnivine suddenly raised one vine like a student volunteering in class. Vine. Well, I think it's solved. Why are you agreeing with them? Saturo muttered in betrayal. Escanor floated nearby, making the robot noises that suspiciously sounded like laughter. Meanwhile, Granny quietly leaned forward again. So. Saturo immediately sensed danger. No, Granny. Ya traveled together for almost 2 years. Saturo. Nope, Granny. She carries the other half of the pendant. Saturo. Yes, Granny. So if you weren't traveling for 2 years and knowing Clara, she won't let that brat go. Not until that brat is 9 or 10. So where did you stay during these 2 years? Quote. Pops suddenly gasped dramatically again. Did you two ever share a single umbrella? Saturo stared at him. What kind of romance-possessed demon are you? Final evolution of old man energy. Pops crossed his arms wisely. I've watched enough dramas. Saturo. That explains nothing. Granny ignored the nonsense entirely. Instead, she looked strangely thoughtful now, but was distracted and forgot about the previous question. Sinnoh, huh? Her gaze drifted toward the old photograph again. Must have been rough. Wait, didn't I ask you something? Saturo. No you didn't. 2 comments 0 vote. Operation Downplay. After some relentless teasing, both Granny and Pops finally left the room. Not before sending 2 Pokémon as distractions. Which, in retrospect, was just a polite way of saying, prevent Saturo from overhearing anything. The evolved Mudkip immediately body blocked the hallway while the Honedge floated beside it ominously like an armed security system. The door shut behind the grandparents. Silence lasted for exactly 3 seconds. Then came a loud crash from outside. Swamp, put the chair down. Pops winced. Think we should worry? Granny sat down calmly. If the house survives another 10 minutes, we'll call it a blessing. Pops nodded wisely. Then he leaned back in his chair. Hey, this reunion was somewhat anticlimactic. Granny stared at him. Shut up and get to the point. About Clara or Cynthia, our grandson, you idiot. Pops blinked. What's wrong with him? Granny looked genuinely offended. Don't tell me you were acting like a fool on purpose. Isn't it natural to tease your grandson? Pops defended immediately, especially when he somehow manages to get involved in whatever this situation is. He gestured vaguely toward the entire house. Granny sighed heavily. Why did I even think you noticed the same thing as me? What, have you counted how many Pokémon he has right now? Pops answered instantly. Ace, Rem, Escanor, that Mudkip, the Honedge, and Carnivine. He paused. Only 6. While counting technically 2 if them are James. The slipper hit him directly in the forehead. Truly an inherited trait. OW. That, Granny snapped, is the literal problem, you old fossil. Pops rubbed his head while glaring at the slipper in betrayal. Our grandson hasn't even finished his internship yet, Granny continued, and at least 4 of those Pokémon attached themselves to him without traditional captures. That finally made Pops quiet. Granny leaned back slightly. You remember Professor Birch's first visit? Pop's expression shifted immediately. The attack. Back then, Hoenn had nearly exploded into chaos before anyone even understood what happened. The original plan from both criminal organizations had apparently been simple. Capture Professor Birch, steal the starter Pokémon, and blame the attack on some mysterious outside enemy, Team Rocket, who was becoming ambitious in the search of Mew and wanted to expand. The problem was that both teams received terrible information. Team Aqua believed Team Magma was the League's newly formed anticriminal task force. Team Magma believed Team Aqua was the exact same thing. Neither side knew the other organization even existed. So both groups arrived at the same place, and immediately started trying to destroy each other. Pops snorted despite himself. They actually wiped each other out. Completely, Granny replied dryly. The battle became such a disaster that Professor Birch escaped almost by accident while both sides were busy fighting imaginary enemies. Ironically, the aftermath made Hoenn safer for years. Neither organization wanted to admit they got humiliated by another criminal group they'd never even heard of, so both sides quietly assumed the League had terrifying hidden forces and became far more secretive afterward. Professor Birch eventually arrived at their place injured and carrying terrified starter Pokémon. Trico recovered quickly, Granny recalled. But Mudkip and Torchic were in terrible condition. Those two were the real targets. Saturo had stayed beside them constantly during recovery, helping feed them, talking to them, sleeping beside them when they panicked. Torchic eventually returned with Professor Birch despite wanting to stay. Mudkip absolutely refused. Tantrums, flooding, biting, screaming. Nothing worked. Eventually everyone just accepted that the Pokémon had already chosen. Pops scratched his cheek. Yeah, I remember that. And then came the Honedge. Pops groaned immediately. Oh no. Professor Birch's 5th visit involved a trafficked Honedge rescued during a raid. The poor Pokémon had been aggressive, unstable, and deeply distrustful of humans. Saturo, unfortunately, thought it was a toy sword. Pops covered his face. He challenged it to a sword fight using a stick, Granny said flatly. Of course he did. The Honedge lashed out immediately. Outside the room something exploded loudly. Swamp. Why is there water on the ceiling? Neither grandparent reacted. And then, Granny continued, that idiot boy apologized to the Honedge because he thought he scared it. Pop's shoulders started shaking from restrained laughter. He stayed beside it every single day until it recovered, Granny finished quietly. And afterward it refused to leave him. Silence settled briefly, and on top of that Honedge was a shiny. Professor Birch wanted to fight Saturo while after that Saturo started laughing every time he saw his face. Remember, the Professor Birch I am talking about was like 10 years old and a new researcher at that time. Closing parenthesis. Pops. So you are saying we should downplay his achievements with our own? Granny. Yes, thought from the way he is moving he might surpass half of them in a decade. My Saturo has being underestimated. 1 comments 0 vote. Copyright infringement. Swampert berged in and used a hydro pump on Saturo's face. Saturo, who opened his arms wide for an cliché reunion troop, was hit by the hydro pump. To everyone's Pokemon's surprise after the attack passed because Saturo didn't even get wet from the attack, much less get flung. Saturo. My favorite anti-Cynthia technique. Slightle pause. Infinity I haven't used since the last month. ... Saturo crossed his arms smugly while the last remnants of water floated motionlessly around him, suspended inches away from his body like an invisible wall existed between him and reality itself. Ah yes, he said proudly. My favorite anti-Cynthia technique. A dramatic pause followed. Infinity. Another pause. I haven't used this since last month. The entire room fell silent. Even the Swampert looked confused. Escanor slowly rotated his head toward Rem. There's a thing known as copyright infringement, nah. Saturo pointed confidently toward the hovering water. I am merely saying the psychic energy, not the cursed energy, just give it a physical form through my aura. You see this? This is the difference between me and normal psychics. Delusion. Saturo. It's not delusion if I can back it up. Says the 9-year-old who would get punched in the face if not for me backing him up. Saturo opened his mouth to argue back. Knock knock. The room froze. Who's there? A voice came from outside the door. Your delivery, sir. Blinked. Oh, a small pause followed. Wait, I'm way too broke and lazy to order anything. Another pause. Who's there? I am calling the 911. The door slowly creaked open. Beast. Immediately collapsed onto the floor after getting hit directly by a stun gun. A tall man calmly stepped into the room while putting the stun gun away like this was somehow normal behavior. The narrator adjusted his coat before speaking seriously. It would be for the best. Looking at The narrator cleared his throat dramatically. Cough. Stopping a hydro pump of such magnitude. He pointed toward Saturo. Without taking damage. The curtains suddenly started fluttering despite the windows being closed. Was no easy feat. The narrator continued speaking with increasing unnecessary dramatic energy. Such a thing could not normally be achieved by ordinary humans. A pause. Nor psychics. Lightning flashed outside. There were no clouds, with the sole exception of one being. The narrator pointed upward dramatically. Gojo Saturo. Silence. From the floor. This is copyright fraud. Nobody listened. A second figure slowly walked through the broken doorway. Dark clothes, white hair, infinite lawsuit energy. Satoru Gojo casually waved. Ah yes, I called you a few chapters ago. Tiny pause. What took you so long? Another man immediately dropped to his knees. The meat eater trembled emotionally. Nothing, sir. Tears formed in his eyes. It is my honor to stand in your presence. Saturo blinked slowly. Why is he called the meat eater? 3 comments 0 vote. This is BS. Pointed at Saturo with pure betrayal in his eyes. You Fing traitor. You brought in a replacement for me. Saturo immediately raised both hands defensively. No. I thought it would lessen your burden. The meat eater instantly stepped forward like an overdramatic butler who had trained his entire life for this exact moment. Do as young master says. Tiny pause. It is your greatest pleasure to even speak to young master. The entire room fell silent. Even the narrator looked uncomfortable. Slowly raised one hand. Hawkeye. The meat eater disappeared instantly. Saturo looked horrified. You Fing erased him from existence, you moron. Casually flicked his finger. Flick. The meat eater immediately reappeared on the floor coughing dramatically while gasping for air like he had just returned from the afterlife itself. I am back. I am back. Narrator instantly panicked and grabbed his shoulders emotionally. You live. Stared at both of them with the dead expression of a man who had mentally given up on life years ago. The narrator slowly let go. Oh. Saturo crossed his arms smugly. Looks like someone's PTM didn't go well. Immediately pointed accusingly at him. All went according to my plan. Saturo stared at him for several seconds. You ain't Ain's gown homie. Silence brat. Meanwhile, the Swampert slowly raised one hand. Swampert. Translation, can we please return to the actual script now? Swampert pointed toward Saturo accusingly. Swampert. Translation. I use hydro pump. You go flying. Bubbles. Saturo slowly removed his glasses with unnecessary dramatic energy. Escanor immediately recognized the signs. The Matang physically recoiled backward. Saturo closed his eyes slowly. I always wanted to do this. Then, after carefully checking that nobody except his Pokémon was nearby, the absolute idiot began chanting. Loudly. With full emotional commitment. Darker than the abyssal trenches. Bluer than the deepest oceans. The water left behind from the earlier hydro pump and the water on the floor slowly began vibrating unnaturally. Escanor covered his face with one metallic claw. Less than he's doing it again. Greater than. Awaken, O slumbering torrents of the primeval world. And heed the call of this blue-eyed young master. The puddles scattered around the room suddenly rose into the air. Water spiraled around Saturo dramatically like a miniature storm. Even the narrator started looking concerned. Let the boundary between the heavens and the sea collapse into a singular beautiful vortex of destruction. Swampert slowly took one step backward. Wash away the foolish sins of this Pokémon. Crash upon the earth and leave nothing but pure cascading ruin. The spiraling water violently condensed above Saturo's hand. The pressure inside the room started increasing rapidly. Carnivine immediately climbed onto the ceiling fan for safety. Wielder of the supreme, forbidden, in most glorious hydraulic arts. My name, Saturo dramatically pointed toward himself. Is Saturo of the Gojo clan. Escanor sighed with the exhaustion of a father of 3 paying taxes. Let the hammer of the great flood descend. Deluge. The gathered water instantly compressed into a glowing sphere above Saturo's palm. The entire room trembled violently. Silence followed. Swampert stared blankly at the floating sphere of destruction. What is this sorcery? The shiny honedge floated beside him silently. Was the chanting even necessary? Saturo pointed confidently without a shred of shame. It makes me look cool. Quote. That is not how abilities work. Saturo. Nah. Escanor slowly floated toward the nearest wall while internally questioning every life decision that had led him to this moment. The Matang silently watched Saturo continue posing dramatically with floating water behind him like the protagonist of the world's most legally questionable anime adaptation. Less than, Mother truly deserves financial compensation for dealing with this every day. Greater than. As he said in his Pokémon voice. Hey Dad, maybe you forgot the step of defusing the attack. Then Saturo unleashed the attack. The whole room except Saturo was flooded. Thank God Ace and Rem were with Pops and Granny. 6 comments 0 vote. Sigh, why do we even bother? As Saturo finished chanting his unbelievably dramatic Chuni spell, the glowing sphere of compressed water above his palm continued spinning ominously. Common sense trembled. The only ones unaffected were Rem, Escanor, and Bob. The 3 Pokémon immediately used Protect. A translucent psychic barrier formed around them, creating a perfectly sealed sphere. Years of experience had taught them one thing. Whenever Saturo started his Shinobu lines, everyone's for themselves. Meanwhile, Mikey wasn't worried at all. The massive Swampert folded his arms proudly and laughed. Swampert. Translation. This level of water attack is ineffective against me. He even puffed out his chest while taunting Saturo. Saturo simply smiled. Without saying a word, Saturo slowly pointed downward. Everyone looked. Then everyone froze. The water covering the floor had begun rising. Not spreading. Rising. Like an invisible box was trapping it. The entire room was slowly becoming a giant water prison. And the speed was increasing. Mikey blinked. Quote. Swampert. Translation. I can literally swim underwater. I am a water type, not a rock type. Did you hit your head or something? If so, let me fix it. You traitor who left me here to suffer. A flashback immediately appeared. Mikey wearing a pink dress. Mikey being forced to play house with visiting children. Mikey being the husband, the dog, the wife, and somehow the baby. Another flashback. Pops forcing him through training. Granny forcing him through even more training. Another flashback. A tiny child trying to brush his tail while calling him Princess Mikey. Back in the present, a vein appeared on Mikey's forehead. Saturo's smile widened. Ice Age. The water instantly froze. A sheet of ice spread across the floor. Mikey looked down. His feet were frozen solid slowly. His eyes drifted toward the edge of the room. The water only occupied a perfect square despite there being absolutely nothing physically containing it. Mikey finally realized something. Saturo had planned this. The entire thing. Saturo leaned forward until their faces were inches apart. A sinister smile appeared. Oh my little Mikey, you've grown weak. A pause. Want me to play house with you again? Another vein appeared. Then another. Then another. Escanor watched everything unfold. Sigh. Why did I even choose to stay with Dad in the first place? If I had chosen Mom, she wouldn't even allow him within my vicinity. The Matang looked toward the heavens. Mom. Saturo looked offended. Escanor, you are making this sound like one of those terrible angst audiobooks on YouTube. A pause. Like I cheated or something. Another pause later, his ears turned red. As said, we aren't even in that kind of relationship. Escanor immediately replied, try that, and you'd be dead meat the moment I tell Mom. Saturo clicked his tongue. Tisk. Then he crossed his arms. So what would it take for you to sing my praises to Cynthia? Escanor answered instantly. Trade me for Oriana. The Matang's eyes gleamed. Of course he wanted his alleged sister to suffer in his place. His internal thoughts immediately betrayed him. Less than if Dad agrees, I can finally enjoy life in peace. Greater than. Less than and Mom would massage my back after a hard day's work. While I will not even have to lift anything. Greater than. Saturo stared. Escanor froze. Slowly. Very slowly. The Matang remembered something. Saturo rubbed his forehead. Escanor, you do remember I can read minds, right? Escanor immediately panicked. Damn it. Clang GGG. The psychic equivalent of a system shutdown occurred. Saturo ignored him and turned back toward Mikey. So, where were we again? Mikey immediately looked toward Bob for support. The red Doublade looked away. Swam. Traitor. Bob sighed. Doublade, this is why I wanted you to learn basic aura sensing. Mikey looked horrified. Then suddenly, Saturo grabbed Bob by both handles. Bob froze. Correction. The author has discovered he possesses the memory of a goldfish. Bob requires a dusk stone to evolve, meaning he is a Doublade, not a Honedge. Please ignore previous continuity errors. Bob, quote. Saturo lifted the sword Pokémon dramatically, then smiled. A genuine smile. Not the smug one. Not the chuny one. Just a simple smile. So, do you two want to turn this world upside down with me? Silence followed. Then Mikey's expression cracked. The giant Swampert shattered the ice around his feet instantly. The next moment he tackled Saturo into a crushing hug. Ampert. Years of frustration exploded out. Bob was already trapped in Saturo's arms, so the Doublade simply gave up and joined in. Both Pokémon started talking at once, complaining OFC. 3 comments 0 vote, insurance scam. Granny walked inside. Then stopped. Silence fell over the room as her eyes slowly scanned the damage. Her precious welcome mat was frozen solid. Half the floor was covered in ice. The couch floated in a giant block of water while her favorite rocking chair drifted nearby like wreckage from a shipwreck. Somehow, a Magikarp was swimming between them. Nobody knew where it came from. Granny's face went blank. Then she clutched her chest. One hand pressed over her heart while the other pointed toward Saturo. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Quote. Saturo's eyes widened. Oh shit, the old hag might actually kick the bucket. Before anyone could react, pop, both Saturo and Granny vanished. Pops. Honey, you forgot to take. Where did they go? Didn't I take my meds already? Meanwhile, a terrified scream immediately echoed from somewhere else. The Pokémon Center. A rookie trainer dropped his Pokeball. A grandmother and a child had suddenly materialized directly in front of him. Saturo ignored him completely and rushed to poke counter. The rookie trainer, however, did not ignore Saturo. In fact, he was currently reconsidering his entire understanding of reality. A few minutes later, Nurse Joy finished checking Granny's condition and smiled. It's nothing serious. Saturo visibly relaxed and sighed. Then Nurse Joy smiled and continued. She simply forgot to take her medication. Again. You must be new here. But she is a daily visitor. After a long pause followed, Nurse Joy looked toward Granny. Then toward Saturo. Then toward Granny again. The amusement in her eyes became visible. Granny immediately looked away. Saturo slowly turned toward her. Quote. Granny stared at the ceiling. Quote. Saturo pointed accusingly. You literally forgot to take your meds and somehow blamed me. Granny instantly sat upright while clutching her chest. She first tried I am sick act, which didn't work due to the hospital. Then you Brad destroyed my furniture. Saturo narrowed his eyes, then narrowed them further, then narrowed them even more, because he could hear her thoughts. Oh yes, I have the high ground. That furniture was cheap replicas specifically bought for poke insurance fraud. Now I can finally get that jewelry without spending a dime. The pleasure of scamming is far superior to buying things honestly. Saturo stared. Granny smiled innocently. Saturo pointed at her. You do know I can read your mind. Granny froze. Then she slowly clutched her chest. You never told me that. A vein immediately appeared on Saturo's forehead. What do you mean I never told you that? You spent years teasing me about Canyon. Granny coughed. The moment the name left his mouth, Granny's eyes lit up. A dangerous sparkle appeared. The topic had changed. Her survival instincts had activated. Oh my, it seems I am getting old. She sighed dramatically. It is wonderful being young. Saturo immediately felt danger. Oh no, Granny smiled sweetly. You even picked a nickname for your little girlfriend. She deliberately emphasized the word little while quietly mumbling the word girlfriend. Saturo immediately took the bait. What do you mean little? She's my age. Silence. Granny smirked. Oh my. You admitted you're in a relationship. Saturo froze. The realization hit him. His soul immediately left his body. Materialized beside the hospital bed. Rookie mistake. Saturo pointed at Granny. This is a setup. Granny casually projected a telepathic message into his head. Brat. Watch closely, for this is one of life's greatest lessons. Saturo immediately became suspicious. What lesson? Granny's smile widened. The art of the insurance fraud. Saturo stared. Stared. Granny proudly pointed at herself. Never answer the question. Make them answer a different question. Saturo played along. That's just manipulation. Granny nodded proudly. Exactly. Then she pointed toward Nurse Joy. Observe. Nurse Joy suddenly looked nervous. Wait, why am I involved? Young lady, Granny interrupted smoothly, has anyone ever told you how hardworking you look? Nurse Joy blinked. Thank you. 5 minutes later, Granny had somehow obtained a free dessert, an extra pillow, a coupon, 3 compliments, and directions to a jewelry store. Saturo watched in horror. Wiped away a tear. She's beautiful. Granny smiled smugly. The scam is an art form. The weak steal. The strong manipulate. The masters get discounts. 0 comments 0 vote. Art of scamming. 3 days later. Saturo had come to a horrifying realization. His grandmother was not joking. The insurance money had actually arrived. The old rocking chair. The floating couch. The frozen welcome mat. Even the damn fake Jordans. Hey, you dare call my Jordans fake? Saturo. Shut it. Everything. All of it had somehow been approved. Saturo sat at the kitchen table staring blankly at the paperwork while Granny happily drank tea nearby. Quote. Even the poke officers were probably sick of her that they didn't even bother to show up. Quote. Saturo looked up. How? Granny took a sip. Experience. No. Saturo slammed the table. How? Granny smiled and said. How do you think we are this rich even after we gave most our business? The smile of a scammer. The smile of someone who had probably committed tax fraud in Monopoly. Sit down, brat. Today I shall teach you. She pointed dramatically toward the heavens. The art of scamming. Immediately appeared. No, you will have me thrown in jail. Saturo ignored him. Lesson 1. If the situation is in your favor. She raised a finger. It was your plan. If reality does not benefit you. She raised a second finger. It was a scapegoat's fault. Saturo blinked. Bees. Why would someone take a fall for me? Granny nodded. Yet here we are. Meanwhile, Pops walked into the room carrying a newspaper. Oh hey, the insurance money came. Granny smiled proudly. It did. Pops looked impressed. Nice. Saturo immediately pointed. Why are you encouraging this? Pops blinked. Because she got away with it. Saturo stared. Then he stared harder. This is a crimey. Pops. No one is a criminal until it is backed by evidence. The silence lasted several seconds. That explains so much about this family. Thank you. Pops nodded proudly. You're welcome. Granny opened a notebook. Across the front was written. The Art of Scamming. Volume 1. Beginner Lessons. Saturo immediately became concerned. There are multiple volumes. There are 12. Granny flipped to the first page. Observe. She pointed toward Pops. Old man, what, do you love me? Pops immediately answered. Of course honey, while putting a rose in his mouth out of nowhere. Truly James Pops. Granny nodded. Excellent. Then she held up a jewelry catalog. 5 minutes later. Pops was buying her jewelry. Saturo looked horrified. What just happened? Granny pointed toward the notebook. Emotional damage. She wrote something down. Chapter 3. Guild Manipulation. Saturo slowly backed away. No, this is evil. Granny gasped dramatically. Evil, you are the one taking notes. And I. She pointed toward herself. I am a sweet old woman. Immediately appeared. Objection. Sustained. Overruled. Denied. Hollow purple. Quote. The courtroom collapsed. Nobody knew why. Meanwhile, Escanor floated into the room. He looked at the notebook. Then looked at Granny. Then looked at Saturo. Then sighed. A very tired sigh. Quote. Dad, why are you learning from her? Saturo pointed at the notebook. I'm not. Granny immediately pointed at him. He is literally taking notes. Everyone turned. Saturo froze. A notebook slowly slid off the table. Written across the front cover were the words. Advanced Psychological Warfare for Cynthia. Escanor stared. Quote. Saturo stared. Quote. Granny smiled. My grandson learns quickly. Oh wait, you are learning emotional damage to use against a girl. I am proud to say you are truly my grandson. That James would probably be fighting me. RN. Escanor immediately floated toward the door. In his poke voice. Nope, nope, I refuse. I'm going to call Cynthia. Mom needs to know. Saturo instantly stood up. Wait. Escanor accelerated. The Matang reached escape velocity. The window exploded. Glass flew everywhere. Silence filled the room. Pops looked outside. Huh, he's getting faster. Granny nodded proudly. Good survival instincts. Saturo slowly lowered his head into his hands. Somewhere in the distance, a metallic voice could be heard. Moon picked the damn phone for Arceus's sake. The cry echoed across the region. Even Arceus probably heard it. Granny sipped her tea. Lesson 2. Saturo looked up. No. Granny ignored him. If witnesses exist, she smiled. Remove the witnesses. Escanor's distant screaming immediately became louder. To be continued.